Annayam Shiguro Shiyata Parakamalam Shigurun Vaishnavamscha Shirupam Sagrajatam Sagana Raganatam Pitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Sabadutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shirana Krishna Param Sahagana Lalita Shivashakam Vitamscha Om Jnanatimarandasha Jnananjana Shlakaya Shakshuram Militam Yena Tasma Shri Gurave Namaha Gurva Bhistam Supurakam Gurganarasisha Sambhushitam Chintya Chintya Samatta Veda Nipunam Shri Rupa Patanagam Govinda Bidam Ujwalam Bharatanam Bhaktyan Bidam Sundaram Mande Vishwagurun Shah Divyad Bhagavat Prem Noe Bija Pradam Devam Divyatanum Suchanda Bharanam Balarka Chelanshitam Sandrananda Puram Sareka Varanam Vairagya Vidyam Buddhim Sri Siddhanta Nidhim Subhakti Lasitam Sarasatanam Baram Bandetam Shubharam Madeka Sharanam Yashishwara Shridharam Vanshakopatarubyascha Kripa Sindhu Bhyevacha Patitanam Pavenibhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah Namo Mahabaranyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namane Gauratavishe Namah. So we're hearing from Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita by Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, translation and commentary by Srila Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj, Prabhupad. And this is Adi-lila, chapter 7, with the Pancha-tattva, Lord Chaitanya and 5 features. And here Mahaprabhu is commenting on the Vedanta Sutra and how the Sharirag Bhashya of Shankaracharya has so many mistakes in it. And so this is text number 107. Brahma Pramada Vipralipsa Karana Patava Ishwarera Bhakyena Hi Dosha Esabha. Material defects of mistakes, illusions, cheating, and sensory inefficiency do not exist in the words of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. A mistake is the acceptance of an object to be different from what it is, or the acceptance of false knowledge. For example, one may see a rope in the dark and think it to be a serpent, or one may see a glittering oyster shell and think it to be gold. These are mistakes. Similarly, an illusion is a misunderstanding that arises from inattention while hearing and chanting and cheating. These are mistakes. Similarly, an illusion is a misunderstanding that arises from inattention while hearing, and cheating is the transmission of such defective knowledge to others. Materialistic scientists and philosophers generally use such words as maybe and perhaps because they do not have actual knowledge. They do not have actual knowledge of complete facts. Therefore, their instructing others is an example of cheating. The final defect of the materialistic person is his inefficient senses. Although our eyes, for example, have the power to see, they cannot see that which is situated at a distance, nor can they see the eyelid, which is the object nearest to the eye. To our untrained eyes, the sun appears to be just like a plate, and to the eyes of one who is suffering from jaundice, everything appears to be yellow. Therefore, we cannot rely on the knowledge acquired through such imperfect eyes. The ears are equally imperfect. We cannot hear a sound vibrated a long distance away unless we put a telephone to our ear. Similarly, if we analyze our senses in this way, we will find them all to be imperfect. Therefore, it is useless to acquire knowledge through the senses. The Vedic process is to hear from authority. In the Bhagavad Gita, the Lord says, Evam parampara praptam imam rajarshayo vidu. The supreme science was thus received through the chain of disciplic succession, and the saintly kings understood it in that way. We have to hear not from a telephone, but from an authorized person, for it is he who has real knowledge. Upanishad Sahita Sutra Tattva Mukhya Britye Se Artha Parama Mahatva. The absolute truth is described in the Upanishads and Brahma Sutra, but one must understand the verses as they are. That is the supreme glory in understanding. It has become fashionable since the time of Shankaracharya to explain everything regarding the Shastras as in an indirect way. Scholars take pride in explaining everything in their own way, and they declare that one can understand the Vedic scriptures in any way he likes. This any way you like method is foolishness, and it has created havoc in the Vedic culture. One cannot accept scientific knowledge in his own whimsical way. In the science of mathematics, for example, 2 + 2 = 4, and one cannot make it equal 3 or 5. Yet although it is not possible to alter real knowledge, people have taken to the fashion of understanding Vedic knowledge in any way they like. It is for this reason that we have presented Bhagavad Gita as it is. We do not create meanings by concoction. Sometimes commentators say that the word Kurukshetra in the first verse of the Bhagavad Gita refers to one's body, but we do not accept this. We understand that Kurukshetra is a place that still exists, and according to the Vedic version, it is a Dharmakshetra, or a place of pilgrimage. People still go there to perform Vedic sacrifices. Foolish commentators, however, say that Kurukshetra means the body, and that Pancha-tattva refers to the 5 senses. In this way, they distort the meaning and people are misled. Here, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu confirms that all Vedic literatures, including the Upanishads, Brahma Sutra, and others, whether Shruti, Smriti, or Nyaya, must be understood according to their original statements. To describe the direct meaning of the Vedic literatures is glorious, but to describe them in one's own way, using imperfect senses and imperfect knowledge, is a disastrous blunder. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu fully deprecated the attempt to describe the Vedas in this way. Regarding the Upanishads, the following 11 Upanishads are considered to be the topmost: Isha, Kena, Kata, Prashna, Mundaka, Mandukya, Taittiriya, Aitareya, Chandogya, Brihad Aranyaka, and Svetasvatara. However, the Muktikopanishad, verses 30 through 39. However, in the Muktikopanishad, verses 30 through 39, there is a description of 108 Upanishads. And then here, in this purport, there are 108 Upanishads listed. I'm not going to read all of them, though. Thus, there are 108 generally accepted Upanishads, of which 11 are the most important, as previously stated. So, Gona Britya Jeba Pasha Korila Acharya Tahara Shavane Nasha Hoy Sarvakarya. Sripad Shankaracharya has described all the Vedic literatures in terms of indirect meanings. One who hears such explanations is ruined. Tahara nahi kadosh ishvara agyapaya gonartha korila mukhya artha acharya. Shankaracharya is not at fault, for it is under the order of the Supreme Personality of Godhead that he has covered the real purport of the Vedas. The Vedic literature is to be considered a source of real knowledge, but if one does not take it as it is, one will be misled. For example, the Bhagavad Gita is an important Vedic literature that has been taught for many years, but because it was commented upon by unscrupulous rascals, people derived no benefit from it, and no one came to the conclusion of Krishna consciousness. Since the purpose of the Bhagavad Gita is now being presented as it is, however, within 4 or 5 short years, thousands of people all over the world have become Krishna conscious. That is the difference between direct and indirect explanations of the Vedic literature. So, of course, this purport was written at the time when the Bhagavad Gita was published. So it's been more years since that, maybe 50 years since that. But many people have read the Bhagavad Gita, the Bhagavad Gitas with presenting the true Vaishnava version given by Srila Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupad and also by Srila Bhakti Rakak Sridhar Dev Goswami Maharaj. These are two major translations in English. And many people have understood what is being given by Krishna to his devotee Arjuna. Therefore, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, Mukhya Britye Se Artha Parama Mahatva, to teach the Vedic literature according to its direct meaning without false commentary is glorious. Unfortunately, Sri Shankaracharya, by the order of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, compromised between atheism and theism in order to cheat the atheists and bring them to theism. And to do so, he gave up the direct method of Vedic literature or Vedic knowledge and tried to present a meaning which is indirect. It is with this purpose that he wrote his Sharirak Bhashya commentary on the Vedanta Sutra. So the idea being presented here is Shankaracharya, he came at a time when Buddhism had been presented in India, and there was a reason for that the way Buddhism was presented, because previously people were distorting the Vedic version to justify such things as sacrificing cows or sacrificing horses to eat meat, and they said this was Go-meda or Ashram-meda. So that was, they were distorting the Vedic version to justify their we can say their wrong activities. So Buddha, when they asked him what his philosophy was in accordance with the Vedic literature, since the Vedic literature was being badly distorted, he said, I don't accept the Vedas. And he just presented Buddhism on the basis of his own authority. But then when Shankaracharya came, he was presenting a philosophy to entice the Buddhists to come to his philosophy. He basically presented a form of veiled Buddhism as putting Nirvisesh Brahman, or the impersonal viewpoint, somewhat similar to Buddhism. He presented that with according to him, with reference to the Vedas, but was actually a distortion of what is the true purpose, a true way of presenting the Vedas. In other words, he presented the Vedas in an indirect way. But there was a purpose in that. It was to bring people back from what was originally the Buddhist presentation back to gradually the Vedas, and then Mahaprabhu later presented Achintya Bheda Bheda Tattva, or simultaneously one and different. So simultaneously one, meaning according to the impersonal view, you are the same, we are the same as the Lord in the sense that we are Sat, eternal, we are Chit, conscious, and Ananda in our pure state. We're happy, full of happiness. But there's Achintya Bheda Bheda Tattva, but there's also a difference in the sense that the Lord is infinite and we are infinitesimal. But the Buddhists were presenting they were presenting the idea of what is the term they use? Nirvana, which is stopping all the activities of the mind, etc., presenting their own form of impersonalism. Then Shankaracharya presented the idea of impersonalism with reference to the Vedas, which is just, practically speaking, veiled Buddhism. But Mahaprabhu brought them back saying, yes, the Buddhism or Shankaracharya, they present half of the truth. that we're the same as the Lord, but they don't present the other half that simultaneously we're different than the Lord, because he's infinite, we're infinitesimal. So it is said that a half-truth is worse than a lie, because a half-truth can mislead many people. But anyway, Shankaracharya was presenting a half-truth to be able to bring the society back to some understanding of the Vedas. One should not therefore attribute very much importance to the Shaidarak Bhashya. In order to understand Vedanta philosophy, one must study Srimad Bhagavatam, which begins with the words Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Janmadhyasya Tonvayad Itaratas Chartishva Bhigyasvarat. I offer my obeisances unto Lord Sri Krishna, son of Vasudeva, who is the supreme all-pervading personality of Godhead. I meditate upon him, the transcendent reality, who is the primeval cause of all causes, from whom all manifested universes arise, in whom they dwell, and by whom they are destroyed. I meditate upon that eternally effulgent Lord, who is directly and indirectly conscious of all manifestations, and yet is fully independent. Srimad Bhagavatam is the real commentary on the Vedanta Sutra. Unfortunately, if one is attracted to Sri Shankaracharya's commentary, Sharirak Bhashya, his spiritual life is doomed. One may argue that since Shankaracharya is an incarnation of Lord Shiva, how is it that he cheated people in this way? The answer is that he did so on the order of his master, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This is confirmed in the Padma Purana in the words of Lord Shiva himself. Mayavadam asats chastram prachanam bodham uchate mayaiva kalpitam devi kalo brahmana rupina brahmanas chaparam rupam nirgunam vakshate maya sarvaswam jagatopi asya mohanartam kalo yuge vedante tu mahashastre mayavadam avaidikam mayaiva vakshate devi jagatam nashakaranat. The Mayabad philosophy, Lord Shiva informed his wife Parvati, is impious, asats chastra. It has covered Buddhism. My dear Parvati, in Kali Yuga I assume the form of a Brahmin and teach this imagined Mayavad philosophy. In order to cheat the atheists, I describe the Supreme Personality of Godhead to be without form, without quality. Similarly, in explaining Vedanta, I describe the same Mayavad philosophy in order to mislead the entire population towards atheism by denying the personal form of the Lord. In the Shiva Purana, the Supreme Personality of Godhead told Lord Shiva, Vaparado yuge budva kalaya manushadishu swagamai kopitas tvam cha jaganmad vimukan kuru. In Kali Yuga, mislead the people in general by propounding imaginary meanings for the Vedas to bewilder them. These are the descriptions of the Puranas. Srila Bhaktivedanta Saraswati Thakur comments that Mukhya Vritti, the direct meaning is Abhida Vritti, or the meaning that one can understand immediately from the statements of dictionaries, whereas Gona Vritti, the indirect meaning, is a meaning that one imagines without consulting the dictionary. For example, one politician has said that Kurukshetra refers to the body, but in the dictionary there is no such definition. Therefore, this imaginary meaning is Gona Vritti, whereas the direct meaning found in the dictionary is Mukhya Vritti or Abhida Vritti. This is the distinction between the two. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu recommends that one understand the Vedic literature in terms of the Abhida Vritti or the Gona Vritti. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu recommends that one understand the Vedic literature in terms of Abhida Vritti, and the Gona Vritti he rejects. Sometimes, however, as a matter of necessity, the Vedic literature is described in terms of the Lakshana Vritti or Gona Vritti, but one should not accept such explanations as permanent truths. The purpose of the discussions in the Upanishads and Vedanta Sutra is to philosophically establish the personal feature of the Absolute Truth. The impersonalists, however, in order to establish their philosophy, accept these discussions in terms of lakshana vritti, or indirect meanings. Thus, instead of being tattvavad, or in search of the Absolute Truth, they become mayavad, or illusion by the material energy. When Sri Vishnu Swami, one of the four acharyas of the Vishnu cult, presented his thesis on the subject matter of Shuddha-dvaitavad, immediately the Mayavadis took advantage of this philosophy and tried to establish their Advaitavad, or Kevala-dvaitavad. To defeat this Kevala-dvaitavad, Sri Ramanujacharya presented his philosophy as Vishtadvaitavad, and Sri Madhvacharya presented his philosophy as Tattvavad, both of which are stumbling blocks to the Mayavadis because they defeat their philosophy in scrupulous detail. Students of Vedic philosophy know very well how strongly Sri Ramanujacharya's Vishtadvaitavad and Sri Madhvacharya's Tattvavad contest the impersonal Mayavad philosophy. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, however, accepted the direct meaning of the Vedanta philosophy and thus defeated the Mayavad philosophy immediately. He opined in this connection that anyone who follows the principles of the Sharirag Bhashya is doomed. This is confirmed in the Padma Purana, where Lord Shiva tells Parvati, Shrinu Devi Pravakshami Tamasani Yatash Kramam Yesham Shavanam Matrena Patityam Jnaninam Api Apartam Shruti Vaktyanam Darshaya Lokagarhitam Karma Swarupa Jyajyadvam Atracha Pratipadyate Sarva Karma Paribramshan Naiskarmyam Tatra Chochate Paratma Jivayor Aikyam Mayatra Pratipadyate. My dear wife, here are my explanations of how I have spread ignorance through Mayavad philosophy. Simply by hearing it, even an advanced scholar will fall down. In this philosophy, which is certainly very inauspicious for people in general, I have misrepresented the real meaning of the Vedas and recommended that one give up all activities in order to achieve freedom from karma. In this Mayavad philosophy, I have described the Jivatma and Paramatma to be one and the same. How the Mayavad philosophy was condemned by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his followers is described in Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, Adi-lila, 2nd chapter, verses 94 through 99, where Swarup Damodar Goswami says that anyone who is eager to understand the Mayavad philosophy must be considered insane. This especially applies to a Vaishnava who reads the Sharirag Bhashya and considers himself to be one with God. The Mayavadi philosophers have presented their arguments in such attractive, flowery language that hearing Mayavad philosophy may sometimes change the mind of even a Mahabhagavata or very advanced devotee. An actual Vaishnava cannot tolerate any philosophy that claims God and the living being to be one and the same. Brahma Shabde Mukyarte Kohe Bhagavan Chidaishvarya Paripurna Anurdva Saman. According to direct understanding, the Absolute Truth is the Supreme Personality of Godhead who has all spiritual opulences. No one can be equal to or greater than him. This statement by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is confirmed in Srimad Bhagavatam. Vedanti tat-tattva vidas tattvam yad-jnanamadvayam brahmeti paramatmeti bhagavaniti shabhyate. Learned transcendentalists who know the Absolute Truth call this non-dual substance Brahman, Paramatma or Bhagavan. The Absolute Truth is ultimately understood as Bhagavan, partially understood as Paramatma, and vaguely understood as the impersonal Brahman. Bhagavan, or the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is opulent in all excellence. No one can be equal to or greater than him. This is also confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita, where the Lord says, Mata parataram nanyat kinchid asti dhananjaya. O conqueror of wealth, Arjuna, there is no truth superior to me. There are many other verses which prove that the absolute truth in the ultimate sense is understood to be the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. Tahara vibhuti deho sabchid akar chid vibhuti achari tareko he nirakar. Everything about the Supreme Personality of Godhead is spiritual, including his body, opulence, and paraphernalia. Mayabad philosophy, however, covering his spiritual opulence, advocates the theory of impersonalism. It is stated in the Brahma Samhita, Ishvara Parama Krishna Sachidananda Vigraha. A Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, has a spiritual body which is full of knowledge, eternity, and bliss. In this material world, everyone's body is just the opposite, temporary, full of ignorance, and full of misery. Therefore, when the Supreme Personality of God is sometimes described as Nirakar, this is to indicate that he does not have a material body like us. Mayavadi philosophers do not know how it is that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is formless. The Supreme Lord does not have a form like ours, but has a spiritual form. Not knowing this, Mayavadi philosophers simply advocate the one-sided view that the Supreme Godhead, or Brahman, is formless, Nirakar. In this connection, Srila Bhaktivedanta Thakur offers many quotes from the Vedic literatures. If one accepts the real or direct meaning of these Vedic statements, one can understand that the Supreme Personality of Godhead has a spiritual body, Sachidananda Vigraha. In the Brihad Aranyaka Upanishad, it is said, Purnam Ada Purnamidam Purnat Purnam Udachyate. This indicates that the body of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is spiritual, for even though he expands in many ways, he remains the same. In the Bhagavad Gita, the Lord says, Aham sarvasya prabhavo mata sarvam pravartate. I am the origin of all. Everything emanates from me. Mayavadi philosophers materialistically think that if the Supreme Truth expands himself in everything, he must lose his original form. Thus they think that there cannot be any form other than the expansive gigantic body of the Lord. But the Brihad Aranyaka Upanishad confirms Purnam idam Purnat Purnam Udachyate. Although he expands in many ways, he keeps his original personality. His original spiritual body remains as it is. Similarly, elsewhere it is stated, Vichitra Shakti Purusha Purana. The Supreme Personality of God, the original person, Purusha, has multifarious energies. And the Svetasvatara Upanishad declares, Sabrika Kala Kritibi Paronyo Yasmat Prapancha Parivartate Yam Dharma Vaham Papanudam Bhagesham. He is the origin of material creation, and it is due to him only that everything changes. He is the protector of religion. He is the protector of religion and an annihilator of all sinful activities. He is the master of all opulences. Vedaham etam purusham mahantam adityavarnam tamasa parastat. Now I understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead to be the greatest of the great. He is effulgent like the sun and is beyond the material world. Patim patinam paramam parastat. He is the master of all masters, the superior of all superiors. Mahan Prabhu Ravai Purusha. He is the supreme master and supreme person. Parasya Shaktir Vividaiva Shruyate. We can understand his opulences in different ways. Similarly, in the Rig Veda it is stated, Tad Vishnu Paramam Param Sada Pashyanti Suraya. Vishnu is the supreme, and those who are actually learned think only of his lotus feet. In the Prashna Upanishad it is said, Sa Iksham Chakre, he glanced over the material creation. In the Aitatreya Upanishad it is said, Sa Aikshata, he glanced over the material creation, and Sa Imal Lokan Asrijata, he created this entire material world. Thus many verses can be quoted from the Upanishads and the Vedas which prove that the Supreme Godhead is not impersonal. In the Kata Upanishad it is said also, Nityo Nityanam Chaitanas Chaitananam Eko Bahunam Yo Vidadati Kaman. He is the supreme, eternally conscious person who maintains all other living entities. From all these Vedic references, one can understand that the absolute truth is a person and that no one can equal or excel him. Although there are many foolish Mayavadi philosophers who think that they are even greater than Krishna, Krishna is asamurdva. No one is equal to or above him. As stated in the Svetasvatara Upanishad, Apani Paro Janavo Grahita. This verse describes the absolute truth as having no legs or hands. Although this is an impersonal description, it does not mean that the absolute personality of Godhead has no form. He has a spiritual form that is distinct from the forms of matter. In this verse, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu clarifies this distinction. Chidananda Teho Tarastan Parivar Tareko He Prakrita Tatvara Vikar. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is full of spiritual potencies. Therefore, his body, name, fame, and entourage are all spiritual. The Mayavadi philosopher, due to ignorance, says that these are all merely transformations of the material mode of goodness. In the 7th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, the Supreme Personality of God has clarified his energies in two distinct divisions, namely Prakrita and Aprakrita, or Paraprakriti and Aparaprakriti. In the Vishnu Purana, the same distinction is made. The Mayavadi philosophers cannot understand these two Prakritis or natures, material and spiritual, but one who is actually intelligent can understand them. Considering the many varieties and activities in material nature, why should the Mayavadi philosophers deny the spiritual varieties of the spiritual world? The Bhagavatam says, Yenye Ravindaksha Vimuktamaninas Tvayasta Bhavad Avishuddha Buddhaya. The intelligence of those who think themselves liberated but have no information of the spiritual world is not yet clear. In this verse, the term Avishuddha Buddhaya refers to unclean intelligence. Due to unclean intelligence or a poor fund of knowledge, the Mayavadi philosophers cannot understand the distinction between material and spiritual varieties. Therefore, they cannot even think of spiritual varieties because they take it for granted that all variety is material. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu therefore explains in this verse that Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, or the Absolute Truth, has a spiritual body that is distinct from material bodies, and thus his name, abode, entourage, and qualities are all spiritual. The material mode of goodness has nothing to do with spiritual variegation. The material mode of goodness has nothing to do with spiritual varieties. Mayavadi philosophers, however, cannot clearly understand spiritual varieties. Therefore, they imagine a negation of the material world to be the spiritual world. The material qualities of goodness, passion, and ignorance cannot act in this spiritual world, which is therefore called nirguna. as clearly indicated in the Bhagavad Gita, Trigunya Vishaya Veda Nistrigunya Bhavarjuna. The material world is a manifestation of the three modes of material nature, but one has to become free from these modes to come to the spiritual world, where their influence is completely absent. Now the Lord, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, will disassociate Lord Shiva from Mayabad philosophy in the following verse. Taradosha nahi teho agya koridas aradje shunetara hoy sarvanash. Shankaracharya, who is an incarnation of Lord Shiva, is faultless because he is a servant carrying out the orders of the Lord. But those who follow his Mayavadi philosophy are doomed. They will lose all their advancement in spiritual knowledge. Mayavadi philosophers are very proud of exhibiting their Vedanta knowledge through grammatical jugglery, but in the Bhagavad Gita, Lord Sri Krishna certifies that they are Maya Prakrita Gyan, that they are Maya Parita Gyan, bereft of real knowledge due to Maya. Maya has two potencies with which to execute her two functions. The Prakshepatmika Shakti, the power to throw the living entity into the ocean of material existence, and the Avaranyatmika Shakti, the power to cover the knowledge of the living entity. The function of the Avaranyatmika Shakti is explained in the Bhagavad Gita by the word Mayaparita Jnana. Why the Daivi Maya, or illusory energy of Krishna, takes away the knowledge of the Mayavadi philosophers is also explained in the Bhagavad Gita by the use of the words Asuram Bhavamashrita, which refers to a person who does not agree to the existence of the Lord. The Mayavadis who are not in agreement with the existence of the Lord can be classified in two groups, exemplified by the impersonalist Shankarites of Varanasi and the Buddhists of Sharanata. Both groups are Mayavadis, and Krishna takes away their knowledge due to their atheistic philosophies. Neither group agrees to accept the existence of a personal God. The Buddhist philosophers clearly deny both the soul and God, and although the Shankarites do not openly deny God, they say that the Absolute is nirakar, or formless. Thus both the Buddhists and the Shankarites are avishuddha buddhaya, or imperfect and unclean in their knowledge and intelligence. The most prominent Mayavadi scholar, Sadananda Yogendra, has written a book called Vedanta Sar, in which he expounds the philosophy of Shankaracharya, and all the followers of Shankara's philosophy attribute great importance to his statements. In this Vedanta Sar, Sadananda Yogendra defines Brahman as Satchidananda, combined with knowledge and without duality, and defines ignorance, Jada, as knowledge distinct from that of Sat and Asat. This is almost inconceivable, but is a product of the three material qualities. Thus he considers anything other than pure knowledge to be material. The center of ignorance is considered to be sometimes all-pervading and sometimes individual. Thus, according to his opinion, both the all-pervading Vishnu and the individual living entities are products of ignorance. In simple language, it is the opinion of Sadananda Yogendra that since everything is nirakar, formless, the conceptions of Vishnu and the conception of the individual soul are both products of ignorance. He also explains that the Vishuddha Sattva conception of the Vaishnavas is nothing but pradhana, or the chief principle of creation. He maintains that when all-pervading knowledge is contaminated by the Vishuddha Sattva, which consists of a transformation of the quality of goodness, there arises the conception of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is the omnipotent, omniscient, supreme ruler, the supersoul, the cause of all causes, the supreme Ishvara, etc. According to Sadananda Yogendra, because Ishvara, the Supreme Lord, is a reservoir of all ignorance, he may be called Sarvagya, or omniscient, but one who denies the existence of the omnipotent Supreme Personality of Godhead is more than Ishvara, or the Lord. His conclusion, therefore, is that the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Ishvara, is a transformation of material ignorance, and that the living entity, Jiva, is covered by ignorance. Thus, he describes both collective and individual existence in darkness. According to Mayavadi philosophers, the Vaishnava conception of the Lord as the Supreme Personality of Godhead and of the Jiva, or individual soul, as his eternal servant is a manifestation of ignorance. If we accept the judgment of Lord Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita, however, the Mayavadis are to be considered Mayaparita Jnana, or bereft of all knowledge, because they do not recognize the existence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, or they claim that his existence is a product of the material conception, Maya. These are the characteristics of asuras, or demons. Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, in his discourses with Sarvabhaum Bhattacharya, said, Jivara Nishtara Lage Sutra Koila Vyas Mayavadi Bhashya Shunile Hoy Sarvanash. Vyasadeva composed the Vedanta Sutra to deliver the conditioned souls from the material world, but Shankaracharya, by presenting the Vedanta Sutra in his own way, has clearly done a great disservice to human society, for one who follows the Mayavad philosophy is doomed. In the Vedanta Sutra, devotional service is clearly indicated, but the Mayavadi philosophers refuse to accept the spiritual body of the Supreme. Therefore, in the Vedanta Sutra, devotional service is clearly indicated, but the Mayavadi philosophers refuse to accept the spiritual body of the Supreme Absolute Person, and refuse to accept that the living entity has an individual existence separate from the Supreme Lord. Thus they have created atheistic havoc all over the world, for such a conclusion is against the very nature of the transcendental process of pure devotional service. The Mayavadi philosophers' unrealizable ambition to become one with the Supreme through denying the existence of the personality of God results in a most calamitous misrepresentation of spiritual knowledge. And one who follows this philosophy is doomed to remain perpetually in this material world. Therefore, the Mayavadis are called Avishuddha Buddhaya, or unclean in knowledge. Because they are unclean in knowledge, all their austerities and penances end in frustration. Thus, although they may be honored at first as very learned scholars, ultimately they descend to physical activities of politics, social work, etc. Instead of becoming one with the Supreme Lord, they again become one with these material activities. This is explained in Srimad Bhagavatam. Aruya Krichena Param Padam Tata Patanti Ado Nadrita Yushmadangraya. In actuality, the Mayavadi philosophers very strictly follow the austerities and penances of spiritual life, and in this way they are elevated to the impersonal Brahman platform. But due to their negligence of the lotus feet of the Lord, they again fall down to material existence. So this chapter about the Pancha-tattva, I'm reading all the commentaries given by Srila Prabhupada, in which he's actually citing the commentaries of the Vaishnava commentators who've written on the Chaitanya Charitamrita. And generally these explanations are fairly long. And therefore we are going a little slowly to give adequate time to hear all the explanations. Now, I'm doing this because I feel this is an opportunity that we have in this particular chapter of Pancha-tattva to hear Prabhupada quoting the Acharyas about the difference between Vaishnava philosophy and Mayabad philosophy, especially that which is presented by Shankaracharya and the Shariraka Bhashya. And this is very relevant, of course, because this chapter deals with the conversion of so many Mayavadi sannyasis that were headed by Prakashananda Saraswati, the leader of the Mayavadi sannyasis. And first, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was asked why he didn't execute the activities of a sannyasi, but was always involved with chanting and dancing, chanting the Mahamantra. And Mahaprabhu first replied that I do so because my spiritual master said that I was a great fool and that I couldn't understand the Vedanta Sutra, so he recommended that I chant the holy names as my main spiritual activity. And then Mahaprabhu says, in doing so, Mahaprabhu describes all the symptoms of ecstasy appeared in his person, and he asked his spiritual master, what kind of mantra you've given me? It's making me seem like crazy. But Mahaprabhu says that my spiritual master was very pleased and said these are actually symptoms of Krishna Prema, and that you're very fortunate that you have developed in this way. Actually, during Mahaprabhu's previous time, he was in Navadip, and in Navadip he was known as Nimai Pandit. He was not thought to be foolish or incapable of presenting real philosophy. But Mahaprabhu speaks in this way to the Mayavadis to make them understand that it is not necessary to just simply juggle words, that one can actually gain some real spiritual advancement just by chanting Sankirtan, by chanting the holy names of the Lord. Then after his explanation about the importance of chanting, then again the Mayavadi philosophers, or Mayavadi sannyasis say, well, what is the harm in hearing about the Vedanta Sutra? And then Mahaprabhu says, if you allow me, I can say something about this. And they, of course, say, yes, please continue. And then he proceeds to dismantle the philosophy of Shankaracharya and say that he has misled so many persons, but there was a reason why this happened, and that we've talked about today. But Mahaprabhu is continuing to defeat Shankaracharya's misinterpretation of the Vedas and bring the Mayavadi sannyasis to the understanding that the real Vedas are about the Lord and one's relationship with the Lord. Or as Krishna says, Vedaischa sarvairaham eva vedyo vedanta-krid veda videvachaham. I'm the knower of the Vedas, I'm the compiler of the Vedas, and by the Vedas I'm all that is to be known. So that's the actual understanding. And Mahaprabhu is, what we're seeing is he's in a very orderly way proceeding to defeat Mayabad Philosophy. And here, Srila Prabhupada is quoting the scriptures, and I feel that we can hear, even though these purports tend to be long, we can hear, and it'll be for us something that we can hear and meditate upon, and it will be of advantage for us. So sometimes I read through the chapter and I don't read all the purports, but on this particular reading, at least on this chapter, Adi-lila, chapter 7, I'm trying to present all these purports because I feel Prabhupada, he wanted to emphasize this. So I'm going to stop here. So I'll conclude here with the end of this purport. This is explained in Srimad Bhagavatam, Aruya Krichrena Paramparam Tata Patanti Ado Nadrita Yushmad Angrayaha. In actuality, the Mayavadi philosophers very strictly follow the austerities and penances of spiritual life, and in this way they are elevated to the impersonal Brahman platform. But due to their negligence of the lotus feet of the Lord, they again fall down to material existence. So now I'll sing Hari Haraya, and we'll continue with this reading hopefully tomorrow. Hari Haraya Nama Krishna Jadavaya Nama. Hari Haraya Nama Krishna Jadavaya Nama. Jadavaya Madhavaya Keshavaya Nama. Jadavaya Madhavaya Keshavaya Nama. Gopal Govinda Ram Shri Madhusudan. Gopal Govinda Ram Shri Madhusudan. Giridhari Gopinatha Mananamon. Giridhari Gopinatha Mananamon. Sri Chaitanya Nityananda Sri Advaita Chandra. Sri Chaitanya Nityananda Sri Advaita Chandra. Garadhara Seva Sadi Gora Bhakta Vrinda. Garadhara Seva Sadi Gora Bhakta Vrinda. Jai Rupa Sanatan Bhatta Raghunath. Jai Rupa Sanatan Bhatta Raghunath. Sri Jiva Gopala Bhatta Dasa Raghunath. Sri Jiva Gopala Bhatta Dasa Raghunath. H.I. Gosai Kori Charana Bandhan. H.I. Gosai Kori Charana Bandhan. Jaite Vignana Shabishta Puran. Jaite Vignana Shabishta Puran. H.I. Gosai Jarmui Taradas. H.I. Gosai Jarmui Taradas. Tasavar Pada Renu Mora Panchagras. Tasavar Pada Renu Mora Panchagras. Tader Charana Sevi Bhakta Sanibas. Tader Charana Sevi Bhakta Sanibas. Janame More Abilas. Janame More Abilas. H.I. Gosai Jabe Braje Koilabas. H.I. Gosai Jabe Braje Koilabas. Radha Krishna Nitya Lila Korila Prakash. Radha Krishna Nitya Lila Korila Prakash. Anande Bolo Hari Bhaja Vrindavan. Anande Bolo Hari Bhaja Vrindavan. Shri Guru Vaishnava Pade Majai Aman. Shri Guru Vaishnava Pade Majai Aman. Shri Guru Vaishnava Pad Padma Koriyas. Shri Guru Vaishnava Pad Padma Koryas Harinam Sankirtana Kohe Narottam Das Harinam Sankirtana Kohe Narottam Das Shri Guru Vaishnava Pad Padma Koryas Shri Guru Vaishnava Pad Padma Koryas Harinam Sankirtana Kohe Narottam Das Harinam Sankirtana Kohe Narottam Das Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Nitai Gora Haribo 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 Jai Saparikara Shishi Guru Guranga Gandharvika Giridhara Ju Ki Jai Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Parabhajaka Charyashta Tara Sadashi Shimad Srila Bhakti Nirmalacharya Maharaj Ki Jai Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Parabhajaka Charyashta Tara Sadashi Shimad Srila Bhakti Sundar Govinda Dev Gosai Maharaj Ki Jai Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Parabhajaka Charyashta Tara Sadashi Shimad Srila Bhakti Rakakshidhar Dev Gosai Maharaj Ki Jai Jai Bhagavan Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Gosai Thakur Ki Jai Jai Om Vishnupad Srila Gaur Kishore Das Babaji Maharaj Ki Jai Jai Om Vishnupad Srila Satchidananda Bhakti Vinod Thakur Ki Jai Jai Om Vishnupad Vaishnava Sarvabhauma Srila Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj Ki Jai Rupanuga Guru Bharga Ki Jai Namachar Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Shri Rupa Sanatana Bhatta Raghunath Shri Jiva Gopal Bhadadash Raghunath Shad Goswami Prabhu Ki Jai Premsi Go Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasati Shri Gaura Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai Vishvavaranya Srila Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai Srila Bhakti Kushamashra Maharaj Ki Jai Srila Bhakti Tilak Niriha Maharaj Ki Jai Ananda Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai Sri Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami Prabhu Ki Jai Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita Ki Jai Srila Vrindavan Thakur Ki Jai Sri Chaitanya Bhagavad Ki Jai Narottam Srinivas Shamananda Prabhu Ki Jai Samaveda Sri Harinam Sankirtan Ki Jai, all the assembled devotees Ki Jai, Shishi Guru Guranga, Shishi Radha Krishna Go, Gopi Govardhan, Sham Guna Radha Kunda Kalindi Yamuna Jo Ki Jai, Samaveda Bhaktivinoda ki jai. Shri Harinam Sankirtan ki jai. All the assembled devotees ki jai. Gaur Premanande. Hari Hari Bol.